We'll learn more of why Illumination Entertainment is doing the Super Mario Brothers movie, a Willy Wonka reimagining, and a reboot of House Party. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello. So,
guys, we got a lot of news to get through, and we're going to try to do it in under 30 minutes. And see if we can do that. But let's first start off with a sad story. An Oscar-nominated composer has died at the age of 48. Brad, you wrote this up over the weekend.
Yeah, this came suddenly over the weekend. Really kind of tragic news. Jóhannsson, who is the Oscar-nominated and Golden Globe-winning composer of the score Arrival, passed away at age 48 in Berlin over the weekend. At the time of his death, there wasn't any indication as to what happened, how he died, or anything like that, but his death was confirmed by both his management company and his own manager online. This is a really, tremendous loss because he had only just recently started gaining traction as a composer for films, pretty much within the past decade or so. He did a lot of work with Denis Villeneuve, Prisoners, Sicario, and he also, the one that he got a Golden Globe for was for The Theory of Everything. And he had a very promising career ahead of him, it seemed like, because those scores are all tremendous. I actually just recently bought the Arrival score on vinyl. And it's just really tragic, especially because he was so young. And, it's always tough when you lose someone who... in the industry that you respect so much and has such a tremendous talent.
Yeah, it's shocking. I was not expecting it. I'm a big fan of his. He just seemed like he was just getting started creating, great soundtracks, and it's a shame we're not going to get any more from him. I hope he recorded a soundtrack for Mother that didn't get used, so I hope maybe someday that will get released so we can finally hear it. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I would be very interested to hear that, especially going off his other work.
The good news is, I guess you could say, is that there are a couple scores that he did that have not yet been released that I believe were finished. Because one of them is for Mandy, the Nicolas Cage thriller that debuted at Sundance last month, and also Mary Magdalene, the biblical drama starring Rooney Mara.
Yes, so those are some things that we have to look forward to. But let's move on in the news to something a little bit lighter, and that is Michael Fassbender is going to star in a feature-length version of Kung Fury. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. Why?
Well, I don't have an answer for that. Everyone probably remembers Kung Fury. It was, an internet sensation. It was about a half hour long. It was funded by Kickstarter. It was meant to send up 80s action films, and now they're turning it into a feature. The original story, they're calling it a sequel to the 30-minute film, but I feel like that's even stranger. I'm sure that it's just basically going to be a remake of the original that also is somehow a sequel. And for some reason, Michael Fassbender is acting in it, and he's also producing it, so he really believes in this project, and I don't know why. I don't think this will turn out that well. I mean, the original Kung Fury at 30 minutes felt like he was pushing it, honestly. For time-wise, I can't picture this stretch to 2 hours, but we'll see.
Last week during the Super Bowl, they announced that Cloverfield Paradox was going to be released on Netflix that night. It was a big surprise. Now Netflix is announcing that Chris Rock's new stand-up special will be released on Netflix tomorrow. So they're announcing it the day before it hits the platform. Brad, what do we know?
So Chris Rock struck a deal a little while back for 2 new stand-up specials, each netting him $20 million from the streaming service. And we hadn't really heard about when they were going to be released. Dave Chappelle had struck a similar deal with Netflix, and we've seen even more than his original deal was for stand-up specials to be released. So now Chris Rock is finally releasing his first stand-up special. They initially released a mysterious teaser video the weekend of the Super Bowl that was just called Tamborine, and all it did was featured several tambourines being played, not really by anybody, just kind of in the middle of, black space. And then no one really knew what it was for or anything like that. But today, Chris Rock posted on Twitter and Instagram and all the regular social media channels the exact same teaser, but this time it had his name attached to it and the title of it, which is Tamborine, albeit misspelled from the usual spelling of tambourine. I'm not sure if there's any significance to that. So that will debut on Netflix tomorrow on Valentine's Day. Maybe give some couples who don't want to go out something to do at home.
Okay, the most interesting part about this to me is the surprise release thing, because obviously Netflix did this with Cloverfield Paradox. They're doing it with this. They planned to do it with Punisher. They were gonna, do it after like this panel at New York Comic Con or something, but that didn't happen in the wake of the shootings. So I'm wondering, guys, is this like a new thing for Netflix that like is for these smaller film releases and these smaller specials, like, is it a better idea for them to just, be like, it's coming out tomorrow and get the, like, this quick buzz instead of like doing a long build up of a marketing campaign? Chris, do you have any thoughts?
I really don't know. It's very strange. I can't figure out what Netflix wants. I mean, to Netflix, it doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters what you're watching so much as long as you're watching Netflix, because, everything is under the Netflix banner. So, as long as they have the subscribers, it almost seems like they don't even care about what content they have, because they do a terrible job promoting their content to begin with. I mean, there are really great movies on Netflix, and they do a piss poor job selling. I mean, Mudbound is an Oscar-nominated movie. They didn't really advertise that at all, which is just nuts to me. So I really don't know what Netflix's deal is, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, even the projects they do advertise, I often go on my Apple TV or Netflix app on my computer, and it will not be on that front page. Like, I'm like, guys, it came out today. Why are you not like putting this on the front page? But Brad, I'm curious what you think. Like, in this new era of, direct to VOD, like, do they need to advertise well in advance, or like, is it just like, we live in this world of social media where you can just like be like, surprise, there's something awesome coming out tonight at midnight?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to programming on Netflix, the whole idea, especially when it's something that they own themselves and they've created themselves, is that anybody can watch it at any time. It's always going to be there. So they're not really looking to rake in like immediate ratings the same way that, like a TV network would for a show's premiere, or the way that a studio wants people in, crowding theaters for opening weekend. All this stuff's going to be on Netflix, essentially forever. So they don't really care when you watch it, just as long as you watch it at some point. And so,
but they do want people talking about Netflix, and maybe gets people talking.
Yeah, for sure. And so like they'll be, whenever they have a big thing that they want to release as a surprise, we obviously just wrote about it when it was announced today. A bunch of other websites who cover entertainment and comedy did the exact same thing. So, Netflix honestly doesn't need to do much to advertise themselves, because everybody else is doing it for them. I mean, and along with that, the whole idea of just people eventually coming around to it is like the people that are super excited about it will watch it right away. Other people will come around to it. Netflix gets their monthly membership, and that's just how it goes. And Netflix is getting to the point now where they have enough original content that I don't think that they really need to make these huge pushes for individual movies or TV shows or comedy specials anymore.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting that, we all grew up in this time where, we had TV Guide and there's a schedule of when things were going to air and what was going to come out. And we had the Entertainment Weekly, fall preview issue where we'd look and see, what new shows were coming out and stuff. And I feel like now, Netflix is starting to build this reputation of like, you don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, you could turn it on one day and like, oh my God, it's some Valentine's Day episode of Black Mirror came on. Do you know what I mean? And I think that probably adds to the excitement of that platform. So I'm excited to see if they do more of that going forward, and if that's a good strategy for them. One thing we were talking about a few weeks ago was the Kitty Pryde movie that was rumored to be in development. Now that has been confirmed. Chris, we have new details. Tell us about them.
Yes, like you said, about a month ago, a story broke that Tim Miller, the director of the first Deadpool, was developing a Kitty Pryde movie, and now that's pretty much been confirmed. He's working on a film currently named 143 with comic writer Brian Michael Bendis. And the story that it broke, it was playing a little coy about what the film is, but there's an Uncanny X-Men comic number 143 that's all about Kitty Pryde. It's like her first solo adventure. So it more than likely is a confirmation that this is indeed that film being developed right now for 20th Century Fox. I mean, there's not a lot of details. There's no date. There's no casting yet, but it seems Fox is definitely moving forward with this Kitty Pryde movie.
Well, that's interesting. Another project that's moving forward is the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and they have landed Harry Potter director Chris Columbus. This one actually sounds more promising than it should. Brad, tell us about it.
So, for those who maybe don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's is this video game that launched online and has become a huge mobile sensation. Kids absolutely love it, even though it is essentially a horror video game that takes place at an establishment called Freddys that is a lot like Chuck E. Cheese, where they have these animatronic animals who are characters that during the day, celebrate birthdays with kids and goof around with them. But at night, they apparently are possessed and kill people and whatnot. So obviously, studios are always interested in turning well-known intellectual property into a movie. That's exactly what they're doing. And the property was originally at New Line, but now it went into turnaround and it's been picked up by Blumhouse. So they're going to bring in Chris Columbus, the director of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Pixels, to take a crack at making this work. He's going to write, produce, and direct this adaptation. So for me, I like the Five Nights at Freddy's games. They're really fun. There's a lot of suspense to them. There's probably a decent movie that could be mined from it. I just don't know if Chris Columbus really has the skills anymore to do something like that. We all know that he wrote Gremlins, back in the 80s, but the 80s were
Goonies.
And Goonies, but the 80s were a long time ago, and his directing skills have left a lot to be desired recently. I would say that the last decent movies he directed were the Harry Potter movies. Since then, he's done Pixels and Rent and I Love You, Beth Cooper, none of which really inspire all that much excitement or acclaim. And I just don't know if he, really has it in him to do anything exciting or good anymore. I mean, I guess there's always a chance that this could reinvigorate him and get him back to those, days when he was writing Gremlins. But I just feel like this is going to be a waste of a good property.
I mean, he hasn't written anything in something like 15 years, and this is the guy that he was on a roll. He wrote Gremlins, Goonies, Young Sherlock Holmes. Gremlins 2, okay, maybe not as good, but 9 months. So he did a bunch of good movies from those eras, and I don't know. I definitely get a Gremlins vibe off of this property. I can definitely see what they're going for, and having this at Blumhouse is interesting because maybe they're going lower budget with it, which could be interesting. I'd love to see these guys actually not CG and actually be animatronic kind of creatures and stuff like that, which I guess would probably go along with the story of this game. I've never played it, so I don't know. But Chris, any thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's?
I have no idea what this is. I guess I'm too old, but I've actually never even heard of this property, so I abstain for now until I know more about what it is.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I didn't even know it was a game. I would go into stores and see these Five Nights at Freddy's figures and T-shirts and stuff. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was an animated show or something. So I think it's probably going for an audience that's probably younger than us, but it is horror, so they're probably gonna have to go R-rated, right, Brad?
I sincerely doubt it. I think that I really don't think they're gonna go R-rated for this, especially just because the game doesn't really have any blood or gore or anything like that.
Oh yeah, they can get around it because it's these creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so I'm pretty sure, especially considering how lucrative this property is for kids when it comes to selling merchandise and stuff like that. I'm betting this will be a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, that makes sense. But let's move on. Talking about kid movies, Peter Rabbit has caused some controversy with a food allergy joke. Chris, why are people mad?
Yes. So I haven't seen Peter Rabbit, so I can't testify to this, entirely. But there is a scene in Peter Rabbit where Peter and his, animal friends, they exploit a character's food allergy. He's allergic to blackberries, and they take a blackberry and put it in a slingshot and shoot it into a character's mouth. And he apparently has a allergic reaction to this. And people are upset about this. People are issuing, stern statements about how it's not, funny to exploit an allergic reaction like that. And Sony actually issued an apology. So there you have it. That's where we are right now.
Have we gone a step too ridiculous? I know a lot of people out there are.
I don't want to run the risk of being insensitive. I get it, especially, if you're a parent and you have a kid who has, a severe food allergy, I get it. But, it's not a movie's job to parent your kids. Like that's your job. You should be able to, the argument is, oh, a kid can see this and they can actually do it. They can, shoot a blackberry into someone's mouth and have them. But, you should be able to teach your kids that that's wrong. And also, putting something in a movie doesn't equal, it doesn't mean you're applauding it. Like, just because something happens in a movie, it doesn't mean you're supporting it. Like, it's just a scene, just get over it. That's what I'm saying. Get over it.
Brad, you're a resident comedy expert. So, where's the line in comedy that you draw? Is this offensive? Should people be offended?
First of all, I am of the mind that there is no line to draw when it comes to comedy. If you're offended, sorry, but I don't care.
Even in a kids, is this rated G or PG? I'm not sure. But
I think it's PG. But here's the thing. From what I understand, and if anybody's sensitive to spoilers for Peter Rabbit, first of all, God help you. But second of all. This point in the movie, from what I understand, is kind of a turning point for Peter Rabbit as a character, because what he does is wrong, and he has to come to terms with it. Like, he realizes that he's gone too far and that he's being kind of a jerk about this situation. And so it's not as if they're, bullying somebody and there's full support for it and it's just a funny thing. It's meant to be a moment where Peter Rabbit kind of has, this realization that maybe he needs to chill out a bit and stop being, giving McGregor such a hard time. So that's the whole point of that moment. Is it's not to make light of it or anything like that. It's a piece of character development, and those kinds of things happen in movies all the time without anyone thinking that certain bad decisions made by characters are being endorsed at all. I just think people just need to stop instantly complaining about things. Just because they, seem to have an impact on, whatever community they have. And it's just, people just got to chill out.
Yeah, I just can't imagine what kind of entertainment we would have if, all the, this complaint, outrage, society that we live in, if, all the studios listened to all that. It would be so lame and boring and uninteresting. And I don't know. I haven't seen Peter Rabbit, but this just sounds stupid to me. But I'm sure some of you out there listening to this podcast will be offended by that. But let's move on. A while back, we learned that Nintendo is teaming up with Illumination Entertainment, the people behind the Minions movies, for an animated Super Mario Brothers movie. So the question a lot of people are wondering, why did Nintendo, after all these years, they've been kind of prudish in the rights of the Mario franchise and Zelda franchise. Why did they decide to team up with Illumination Entertainment out of everybody? Brad, what do we know?
Initially, the short answer is synergy. Illumination Entertainment is based at Universal Pictures, and Nintendo had already started working with Universal because they're developing a Super Mario World theme park at the Universal Studios Japan location. So they already had a working relationship with Universal, but that's exactly how Nintendo got hooked up with Chris Meledandri, who is Illumination's CEO. And so after talking with Chris Meledandri, Nintendo realized that Illumination might be the best placed in order to create a Mario Brothers movie since the first time it happened, which was a complete disaster back in the early 90s.
Yeah, but this one probably will have fart jokes, right?
I mean, one hopes that they'll have, the holy grail of humor, which is the fart joke.
Is that the difference between Illumination Entertainment and Pixar? Fart jokes?
I mean, that's not the only difference, but but yeah. So it's whatever Chris Meledandri and Illumination talked with Nintendo about. They seem to like what they heard. Shigeru Miyamoto was talking about how that really they just like their approach to it, and they've already started talking about what they want to do. They've met a number of times to hash out the screenplay, and they're still making progress on it. But he does note that, if they can't make something interesting, then they'll call it quits. So this is by no means something they're trying to force. It's something that if they can make it work, then they'll do it. But as of now, there's no guarantee it'll happen, but they're really trying to make it work.
I'm interested to see what they come up with, because I feel like, you could go to the basic Mario storyline, but there's not much there, and every Mario game has done something weird and new to that world. How do either of you guys have any idea of what the approach would be in making a Super Mario Brothers movie in animated form?
I just hope they literally remake the live action one with Bob Hoskins. That's what I'm hoping. I want that, but in animated form.
Brad, any thoughts?
I would like to see them just do an adaptation of Dr. Mario, where everyone just watches pills stream down the screen for an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I wish they would make a Captain N the Game Master movie, where like a guy actually gets sucked into the video games and he has to go through the different video game worlds, and it's kind of like I guess it's kind of like Wreck-It Ralph, because you could do that mashup kind of thing with Wreck-It Ralph.
Or Jumanji.
Jumanji, yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm just basically reiterating projects that have already happened. So, yes, let's move on. Speaking of projects that have already happened, they're making another Willy Wonka movie from the director of Paddington. Chris, what do we know?
So in 2016, actually, there was a word going around that Warner Brothers wanted to make a Willy Wonka origin story, I guess was the original idea, and then we haven't heard anything about that for a while, but now it's back in the news, and they've hired Paul King, the director of Paddington and Paddington 2, to helm the film. I don't know if they're still going with the origin story idea. I mean, the same writer, Simon Rich, who also writes for Saturday Night Live, is still involved, so perhaps they are still going to go with the Willy Wonka origin story, but either way, they're making a new Willy Wonka film, and they wanted to launch a Willy Wonka franchise because why not?
And this is, Tim Burton did a film a few years back, and I remember them promoting that, saying, like, this is more like the book. You'll find out more about, like, the origin of Willy Wonka, and I think, like, in the film, there's, like, maybe, like, a few minutes dedicated to that. We get to see how he got the Oompa Loompas and one of his adventures. Wasn't very satisfying. I can't imagine that this is going to be satisfying. But Brad, do you think there is enough in Willy Wonka to create the Willy Wonka cinematic universe?
I mean, if there's one thing we learned from the Star Wars prequels, it's that finding out the origins of things that you love is always a good idea. So I'm all about finding out how Willy Wonka came to love candy and how he got that awesome hat and that cool purple sport coat.
How he invented the elevator.
Yeah, exactly. How he met Slugworth, and concocted a scheme to trick kids and then, make it seem like they were being murdered. Yeah, I can't wait to see how that pans out.
I mean, maybe it could be like the Circuit Wars, where it's like Willy Wonka versus Slugworth, like in the War of the Candy. No?
Okay. Honestly, if that's the movie, you just got my interest.
We'll have to wait and see. I know, Chris, you ran this quote that I think we got, Jóhann got from the producer a while back.
Right.
What did he say?
He insisted it's not a remake. It's again an origin story. Let's see here. He says, I think there's a lot in his character, him being Willy Wonka, that suggests who he is and also where he might come from and what his childhood or middle age might have been like. So we're exploring that. So there you go. Middle-aged Willy Wonka is their hook here. I'm very excited.
I just feel like the magic of the man that is Willy Wonka, well, first of all, is Gene Wilder. Like, if you don't have Gene Wilder, you're screwed. But secondary, it's in the mystery of who that man is. Like, you kind of, like, you know, when he goes to those gates and then does the somersault thing, like, you have no idea what this guy's going to do or who he is. You know, he's such a enigma of a, he's finding out who he is, I feel like, is going to be as detrimental to the Willy Wonka franchise as finding out who Michael Myers was to the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. I feel like we don't need that curtain pulled away. I feel like the interesting part about Willy Wonka is we really don't know what's going on there. But Hollywood has run out of ideas. They're doing sequels, they're doing prequels, they're doing reboots, reimaginings, and now we have word that they're doing a reboot of the House Party series, coming from, of all people, LeBron James.
Yeah, LeBron James, as many people know, is a professional basketball player, but he has since crossed over into entertainment. He had a key role in Trainwreck, the Amy Schumer romantic comedy directed by Judd Apatow, and he was pretty hilarious in it. And now he's getting into producing, since he's the one who is behind this House Party reboot that is apparently something that people want or need. For those of you that don't know, House Party is this movie from a while back, 1990, that starred Kid and Play, who were a hip-hop duo at the time, as a couple of high school kids who put on a big old house party. And it was successful enough that it spawned not one, but two sequels in 1991 and 1994. So apparently the time is ripe for another movie to come along where a couple of high school kids plan a big old party. I mean, we've seen this countless times before, but because there's always a generation of high schoolers who love watching movies about getting away with big parties and, drinking and sex and all that jazz, it only makes sense that a movie like House Party will get rebooted, especially now that Hollywood has seemingly caught on to the fact that movies with predominantly African-American casts can do really well at the box office. I feel like we're going to see studios approaching some of these other movies from the 80s and 90s that had predominantly black casts and giving them the reboot treatment. House Party was one of those movies, and I could see it, being successful at the box office today. So we'll see how it turns out. There's no word on who's going to star in it or anything like that. It might be a couple rising stars, could be a couple well-known people, but apparently Drake might have a song on the soundtrack. So neat.
Okay, so I guess my first question is, if they're rebooting House Party, how does, the 2010s, or I guess, probably 2020 by the time this comes out, change the dynamic of that, story or those characters?
Well, the world will be a radiated nuclear wasteland by then, so that'll be a big twist. House Party in the wasteland. I
mean, maybe it could be, could follow Kid and Play as women. Maybe, maybe we'll double down on not just having, going for a movie with the black audience, but also going for the women lead gender bending twist. Brad, any thoughts?
I think that's an interesting approach for sure. We've seen plenty of movies where guys are the ones who get to have all the fun. Project X was a prime example of, a group of kids getting together and putting on a crazy party, albeit with the found footage angle, mixing things up a bit. But rarely do we get to see women cutting loose in the same way. Thankfully, movies like Bridesmaids and Girls Trip have started to change the game a little bit and let women have a little bit more irresponsible fun. So, if they bring a couple of, comic actresses into this movie and can make it work that way, I would be interested.
It's interesting too because Kid and Play came from music before that movie, right? Am I wrong?
They were a hip hop duo.
So do we expect? You mentioned Drake. Could he be? Well, I guess he's too old, right? Like, are they going to try to find someone from the music world to bring in to this film, or do you think that's not even in the plans?
I can't imagine it's their top priority unless there's somebody who immediately fits the bill of a duo that is already like an established rap group that can come in. Maybe you could get Chance the Rapper to do it, but he's already doing his own thing with movies. So I wouldn't bet on it, but you never know.
Well, I think that does it for the news. Brad, where can people find more of your work online?
Always at theslashfilm.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton, and check out my podcast, Go Flix Yourself, on iTunes and other podcasting platforms.
Chris, where can people find more of your work?
I'm also at /film, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
And you can find me on /film, at /film on Twitter. You can find this podcast published almost every weekday. Yesterday we had to take the day off because we had some server issues that I had to deal with. But you can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please subscribe to us. Follow us. Send an email to us at peter@slashfilm.com. If you have a question, comment, concern, please go rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Spread the word, tell your friends, and we will see you tomorrow.